We're going to talk about the triple threat. So we're going to look at inventory as not just counting, right, but the holistic approach of what really gets us to use our inventory management solutions to their best ability. And ultimately, what we want to get to is our actual versus theoretical reporting. So in order to do that, we've got to make sure all of our processes are true. So let's move on to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about some housekeeping items. So today's session is being recorded. You'll receive the link in your inbox within the next 24 hours usually. All your lines are muted, so we definitely want to hear from you, and feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A box at any time. You'll see that questions or Q&A question mark down at the bottom. You can plug that in. Questions can go in there at any time. We're going to circle back later and try to tackle as many as we can. Use the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from, or chime in as we go along. We'd love to raise the energy. There's even some emojis you can throw at us if you'd like. So finally, stick around to the end. We've got some special announcements, and you will not want to miss those. So thank you for joining us live. We do appreciate that. Here's what we're covering today. We'll kick things off with a quick intro to Dan, our coach, and then we'll dive into practical best practices around inventory management using Restaurant365 solutions. We'll wrap up with that Q&A and a few exclusive offers for you live attendees. So our goal is to give you actionable tips that make inventory less painful and more profitable. So let's get into it and meet today's coach. So we're lucky to have Dan with us today. He's a customer success manager here at Restaurant365. As I mentioned, he works directly with our customers across the country, helping them streamline operations and maximize ROI. Dan brings deep industry experience to the table. So before joining us, he ran multi-unit restaurant operations, has a sharp understanding of the day-to-day challenges operators face. And he's not just, a systems expert. He's someone who has been in those shoes of yours. I've got a fun fact about Dan. I love to share this, just humanize our people here. Dan and his wife, Erin, love to travel every chance they get. And Dan once overcame seasickness long enough to take a photo with this marvelous tuna that he did not catch. So if he can do that, trust me, he can help you conquer inventory. So let's get started, and we're going to open things up with a poll. So we just want to know kind of who's in our audience today, and that'll help us curate the content for you. We can speak to your challenges and needs directly. So how familiar are you with Restaurant365's inventory management features, right? You might be really familiar, somewhat familiar, just starting out. I see some of you brand new to it, maybe not know much about it at all, right? You're just kind of getting a little bird's eye view into what it can do for you. So, and then also, what are your top challenges with inventory management? So we're going to give everybody, a few, maybe 30 seconds to get those answers in, and we'll share them with everyone else. All right, let's go ahead and see. We're going to share the results here. So many of you are very familiar or somewhat familiar, but we do have some folks that are just starting out or brand new to it, right, who don't know much about our inventory management solutions. And then obviously top challenges, it seems they're pretty even across the board. Statistically, right, we call that normalization. So we have all these challenges: tracking waste, managing supplier orders, keeping up with stock levels, forecasting demand, and other. So if you want to drop things in the chat, let us know what those other things are. All right, so Dan, I'm going to hand it off to you, and we're going to dive into those deeper, fun topics that talk about inventory in a more holistic way.
Well, thanks, Laura Lee. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. So as Laura Lee said, we're here to discuss and coach up the inventory module. We want you all to know what it takes to run it smoothly, to get value out of it. It's a great topic and a valuable part of R365 for restaurant operators. These are tools that you can use to, at a bare minimum, gain a firmer grasp of what is going on with your COGS, but ideally really help the bottom line by making a measurable, dollars and cents difference in your operations. So let's get started. And right before we dive into the specifics on the R365 side, I just wanted to highlight some statistics we have about why this stuff is important. As you all know better than me, the industry is especially tough right now. Price variability, price increases in general, supply chain disruptions, even the prospect of tariffs recently. So I want to highlight some specific numbers here that emphasize how a solution like R365 can help. Restaurants lose 4 to 10% of food to waste and theft. That's according to the National Restaurant Association. As you can imagine, 4 to 10% of an inventory spend can mean big bucks, a lot of money, even if it's just clawing back 1 or 2% of that waste. Up to 75% of inventory variances go undetected when counts are infrequent or manual. This is from our own customer data. And it goes without saying that the less visibility you have, the tougher it is to manage anything. And this backs that up. Operators using inventory software are 2 times more likely to hit target margins from restaurantowner.com. This also backs up that same fact. If you can maximize visibility, you can take action. And then automated inventory, this is a good one, saves 10 to 15 hours per week per location, according to our customer data. This is a motivator in and of itself. We all want our managers on the floor focusing on customer service or training staff. If we can make inventory processes a time saver, it's a no-brainer to take advantage of it. So today's topic, as you know, really centers around inventory management and managing COGS. And I wanted to take, a holistic approach to this. I'm using an infinity loop here to illustrate how all of this works and is interconnected. You'll hear me use the term operator continuum, which is really kind of fancy, but that's what this is meant to represent. So much so that, this whole continuum, this interconnectivity, it was difficult to pick the order that these sections would go in. We receive product, we're invoiced for product, we count product, we use product, we order more product, and the process starts over. We're going to talk about all of these areas today. Ultimately, however, the North Star for this entire discussion is highlighted in red here on this slide, COGS. What is my cost of goods sold? The what is really the beginning of the puzzle. The real value lies in finding out the why and the how. Why is it that number? How can it be lower? And that's what I want to dive into today. So where's our starting point? What did we go with? Our starting point today is accounts payable. That may come as a surprise to some of you, but I promise we'll be diving into inventory counts very soon in the next section. I chose accounts payable because it's an important and often overlooked part of how inventory works. Because as you guys know, what good is counting product if the costs associated with it are incorrect or inaccurate? I often have discussions with operators who are getting started with inventory, who have built beautiful templates for key items. They have managed their items beautifully, set up proper cost and inventory accounts, only to count the product in their first count, expecting to see, $10,000 of steak or lobster counted, only to look at the total on the inventory count in R365 and see $0 or $22 or $2.75 million. This is almost always because the AP invoices that are informing the system of the cost have errors. And very often the response to me pointing that out, even though it's an easy fix, is for them to say, well, Linda does that, or that's Chef Terry's job, or let me check with corporate. So some things to consider are, who is entering AP? Are they a different person or team than people who are doing counts? Often that's the case. If so, just make sure both parties are aligned, or at least have the people that are doing the AP know that it has effects downstream. Ultimately, AP needs to be approved with accurate costing. That's the bottom line. So how can we make that easier? Right off the bat, let's simplify getting these invoices into the system. Even a smaller restaurant group, even a single location, can produce a startling amount of invoices. Having to enter all of these manually in R365 would be tough, if not outright, infeasible. But we can simplify the process. And the best way is EDI. I can't emphasize it enough. EDI, EDI, EDI. Any vendor that you have that can integrate with R365, set them up. We have a list in our support center that shows all of the vendors we integrate with. And this list is long. It's, it's like over 100 vendors. It's not just the big guys, the big broadliners. We have quite a few. So feel free to check that out and maximize your EDI integrations. For smaller vendors that don't integrate, we can use AP Capture Pro or Capture AI to get those invoices created without your people having to do it. Capture Pro utilizes a data entry team that can manually create invoices, and it's within 1 business day of upload. Capture AI is a newer offering that allows, it utilizes AI to do basically the same thing. In the early going, there's some teaching involved with the AI, but I have plenty of customers that use it and love it. Of course, there will be an occasional need to manually create an AP invoice. The goal is to minimize this, of course, but when it happens, you can treat it like any other non-EDI invoice by uploading it to Docs to Process with one of these 3 methods. You can upload it with the Red app. It's a really easy process, and you can have, depending on the access you want to set up, any number of employees can have access to taking a photo of an invoice and uploading it to Docs to Process. It could be, a duty instead of rolling silverware. You could have an employee take pictures of invoices. You can also email these to Docs to Process. You just whitelist the email and they'll pop up right there in Docs to Process for your accountant or whoever to process. And you can also set up an FTP folder to drag and drop folders of these invoices in if that's more to your liking. So here I just wanted to touch from an AP perspective on some key knowledge points for managers in terms of accounts payable specifically. Every organization is different. Some organizations limit access to who can manage items or invoices to a corporate location, or a centralized management location, or a district manager, an area manager. Some organizations let locations have a lot of autonomy, and I often see this. In either case, make sure that if a person at the store level has access to manage items, to create items, edit items, delete items, that they understand how the system works. Understanding AP and inventory is a big ask for someone that doesn't know the difference between a purchased item and a vendor item. We have a support article specifically about that outlines it really succinctly and easily. It sounds basic, but it's a foundational piece that, if lost track of, could result in someone duplicating items, mapping incorrectly, creating a mess. And that's the last thing we want to see happen. The same is true for invoices. And I think outside of items, the invoices themselves, and I think maybe more important to successfully completing inventory of these invoices. Ideally, store managers can access these invoices. They can have access to make quick corrections to U of M's in AP invoices, which is often the thing that needs fixing. And they can do this without having to call a corporate location or having to wait on somebody in accounting. You can imagine how much that would slow down the process of taking inventory. Having managers that can diagnose these costing issues in AP and correct them while they're doing account, and they see the issue pop up in account, is a huge advantage. And it takes a load off of the people processing your AP if they're different than the people doing the inventory counts. And it allows managers doing the inventory accounts to see costs accrue in those counts that are correct. So it's always best to verify your AP, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about. You want to make sure it's correct. And we've implemented a feature that makes that about as simple as possible. And it's called item category variance caps. These kind of help you isolate your problem children for a few. These item level invoices, you've got a long list of items. It would be hard to just go one by one and run and crunch these numbers by memory or having to dive in. Basically, once you set up an allowable percentage of variance to your item categories, and this would apply, by the way, to both increases and decreases, when price fluctuations come through that are above that percentage, outside of that percentage you set up, we will highlight that item automatically. Now, this could be used strictly to alert you to price increases, but it can also be super valuable to identify when a mistake in AP was made, like a wrong U of M, typically. If a beef item goes up 20% in a given period, That may be par for the course, these days. But if you see an item that's gone up 20,000%, then we have a U of M error, and it needs to be corrected. And ideally from a manager doing the count. So now in this AP section, we get to talk about something that's, I think, the where the rubber meets the road, something super useful, and that's reporting options. With these, you can see this stuff in action. This to me is the payoff. So the first one is the item cost percent breakout. This is going to essentially rank your items according to their percentage impact on your overall COGS. So, for example, if you're a lobster restaurant, I would imagine the item on top would be lobster, right? As a percentage of your COGS. This report allows you to prioritize where you focus at the item level. And the next report, and we're going to kind of combine these reports to use them in tandem. So this is the other one. The next report is the item price verification report. This is super valuable in determining the what and the from who and the how much for your purchasing over a selected date range, which is huge. You can see how putting this data all in one place makes it easy to see opportunities to change your purchasing so you can claw back some COGS. You can see in this screenshot I've got here, we've got 3 locations, and we can see the prices that each location is ordering, and we can dive into that. For example, and this is a real example I got from a colleague of mine. We've got a customer that used the item price verification report that we just looked at, and the item cost percent breakout. They identified with the latter the top 3 items they purchased in terms of spend. And then with the price verification report, they can look at the variability in purchasing across 21 locations. Ribeye, for instance, there was a 6.5% difference between the highest and the lowest location among those 21. Lobster tail, there was a 10% difference, and tri-tip 9% for these very key items. Key enough that those 3 items made up a spend in the last 6 weeks for this customer of $650,000. So if we dive into that and find out that we can get a couple of locations to order from a different vendor, we can align that, we can fix that. The money that you can save there, I mean, it's a lot. And you can imagine that with all of that aligned, that's an easy win and a lot of money. And that's just 6 weeks. Do this over the course of the year, and that could accrue to, who knows. So that's it for AP. So, we've received product and have been invoiced for product with AP. Now we need to put it on the shelf and count it. So this brings us to inventory, the meat and potatoes of today's session. But first, I think we've got another quick poll. Right,
We
Lorelei?
do. We do. Yeah. So we're curious to know how often you perform a full inventory count. And also which inventory insights are most valuable to your team. So what are you really concerned about when you're counting? I'm going to give you guys a few more seconds. And then we will take a look at the results. Get them in there. 3, 2, 1. Awesome. All right. So here we are. Looks like we're doing a lot of weekly and period or monthly counts. Some of you are doing bi-weekly and some less frequently than these options. We're definitely going to talk more about that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Awesome. Let's go, Dan.
Okay.
Dive in.
So counting inventory the right way. So we're going to start at the top. We all get inventory counts, stock counts, why we do them. We want to count product to show actual usage, COGS. But why do regular inventory counts matter? They matter because we don't want to just rely on a big bucket of monthly AP to reflect our food cost. We can do better. We want to receive that product, pay for that product, and then count it on the shelf and regularly deplete it gradually back into food cost. And that looks more like this, ideally week to week, ideally day to day, hour to hour. But in terms of practicality, week to week, I think is the gold standard. We want to see product deplete gradually in the moment, week to week, so that we can be nimble, manage COGS more quickly, identify variances week to week, correct them, and see improvement. If we can identify a problem with a particular item's usage early on in any given month and take steps to correct it, then we can save dollars. The alternative is to find out at the end of the month and without really knowing the culprit, just kind of generically, nebulously try and do better next month. So what are COGS? I mean, what is the calculation? What goes into that number? Going back to the first slide in the section where in that scenario, we were just adding up all AP invoices for the month and having that equal COGS for that month. There's not anything criminal about that, but what insights does that provide beyond a line on the P&L? What can a manager do with that information after the fact? I would say nothing. And regular inventory allows an operator to utilize the tried and true COGS equations shown here. I think you guys are familiar with it. It's beginning inventory plus purchases minus ending inventory. We can see it, our actual versus theoretical analysis report, which we're going to get into later. That is the bedrock foundation of this report. You can see it at the top there. We've got beginning inventory, purchases, plus or minus transfers, minus ending inventory, and that gives us our actual usage. This is the bedrock equation that we arrive at the number that's central to this entire presentation today. So I just wanted to highlight that briefly. So benefits of more frequent counts, right off the bat, you can align your COGS with sales. Most of us want to see actual COGS numbers, but we also want to see that as a percentage of sales. Seeing this week to week is way more valuable than just month to month. And it improves accuracy of something that is a unique thing that R365 can provide you, the mere concept of a weekly P&L. That report, having access to that is huge. It being accurate is equally as huge. And to that point, we've got our P&L operations statement. This is a great report that a colleague of mine showed me months ago, that in this report, we can see a weekly P&L with actual COGS as a percentage of sales for that specific week. And we can see it accrue against a budget if you've got budgets set up. This way, an operator can see early on if they're tracking to be over budget, under budget. They can run this in the first week in the period and take a look at their, actual usage for, their COGS, their BEV COGS, their, some subgroup of food COGS, and see where they're at and compare that to the budget and decide if, we're way off track here. Something needs to be adjusted. You can have that visibility with this report. And like all our reports, this is one that you can set up for a subscription to where it's automatically emailed out to managers on a weekly basis, to where we don't have to depend on them to run this report. It can be in their inbox every Monday morning at 8 a.m. and they can take a look at it. It's a huge tool. So once we have this data, we start to maintain tighter control of variances. That's the difference between actual and theoretical usage. Now, we aren't going to go too deep into the theoretical side of things today. Theos involve building recipes that we can map to buttons in your POS that after they pull in daily with sales, sales data in the DSS, the daily sales summary, we can deplete that inventory on a theoretical basis. So actual versus theoretical is basically saying, how much did we actually use? This is dictated by your inventory counts, what you actually counted on the shelf in real life, versus how much should we have used, as dictated by your recipes and sales data. So these variances can be only a handful of things. Either food is being wasted, dropped, mishandled, ordered too much, which we'll get into later, and it's spoiled, over portioning by your chefs, or there's an error of some kind, or hopefully not, but theft, and I put a image of Chef Terry, it's AI generated, running out the back of a restaurant with a box full of steaks. We hope that's never the case, but if it is, with monitoring this stuff, you'll be aware of it and you can, take action. So when you get started counting inventory, and you want to do it right, what's the biggest advantage you can give yourself? And my advice to customers who are just getting started, or even customers who want to just get back to basics, is to start small with key items. This is really good advice, no matter the situation, big or small, doesn't matter the concept. In this example, imagine you're a hamburger concept. What would you really care about? Ground beef for sure, maybe tomatoes. Pretty good chance you would care about your cheeses. Ketchup packets, probably not. Packaging, probably not, at least not to begin with. And counting weekly these key items, it might mean counting more often, but it limits the fluctuations in stock to be as minimal as they can be. And that makes counting easier. And besides, it's easier to track what happened in the last few days or last week than it is a month's worth of potential inventory transactions. So doing these inventory counts more often, it might seem on its face to be more work, but honestly, it does make it easier. So it's not going to feel so much that way, is what I want to emphasize here. So managing waste. I like to talk about this because it's something I want to see personally my own customers take more advantage of. I have a lot of customers that use it. I have some customers that don't. And when I see that, this will always come up with my customers because, as it says on this slide, it's an easy lift and it's big insights. It's not hard to use this module, and there's huge benefits to it. So, waste is something every restaurant deals with, no matter how big or small. Whatever the concept, waste will always be a factor. This makes logging and measuring it a huge opportunity. And as we will talk about in the ABT slide coming up, logging waste will allow you to see how much of any given item variance can be explained. If we used 20 extra pounds of ground beef in week 2, but see a waste log that was entered for that week for 15 pounds, that variance looks a lot more explainable. At that point, it might be a one-off conversation about an innocent mistake, but if waste isn't logged, like many other things we've talked about today, it can't be managed. And waste is easy to manage. As you may know, every item has to have an inventory account and a cost account. Waste is not a required field on a purchased item, but if a waste account is selected for an item, then it will be available for selection in waste logs in R365. And when an item is entered into a waste log and that waste log is then approved, we just ding that waste account for the amount that was wasted according to the cost of that item when the waste log was filled out. It's a really simple process, and I always like I said, I highly encourage my customers to do this. And that brings us to the actual versus theoretical report. Anytime a customer gets to a point where they are taking regular inventory, they're approving AP that's correct, they're logging waste, I love to show them the actual versus theoretical report. Even if they don't have or are still creating recipes for the theoretical side, it doesn't matter. This is a valuable report for actual COGS, even without comparing those numbers to theoreticals, which is hugely beneficial, but not necessary to get value out of this report. As you can see here in the top of the report, we have our net sales for the date range selected by the from and to counts. And the top row should look familiar. It's the COGS equation. We can see for each item listed, organized by item categories, our beginning quantity plus all purchases for the date range, plus or minus transfers in or out, minus the ending inventory quantity, which gives us actual usage. This report will show that usage in both quantity and in actual dollars, depending on your preference. You just have to toggle over to the right side of the report to see all the same data in actual dollars. And something that I find especially useful is that every number you see here that's in blue can be drilled into. So beginning inventory doesn't look right at a glance. Click into that figure on this report and look at the count. It'll take you to it. For the item itself, clicking purchases will show you a list of AP invoices. Is one incorrect? Is one missing off the top of your head? Click through to see. It'll show you the AP invoices and the costing associated with those right there from this report. It kind of allows you a portal into every aspect of your actual usage equation so you can adjust things as needed right from one place. As far as inventory goes, this is a powerful tool. and it demonstrates all of the moving parts that it takes to get to the COGS number that we want. It's a great way to tie off this section and move on to purchasing. So to tie this up into a bow again, I want to complete this operator continuum by talking about our purchasing module. If you are approving good and timely, accurate AP invoices, and you are taking good inventories, R365 has powerful tools here that you would absolutely want to take advantage of. First, if you have come this far, and as I said, have AP and inventory in the same system, well, why not consolidate it all? Everybody can live in one place and work together and be happy. So centralize it. That's kind of a big theme with R365 is getting all this stuff in one place. If you use the R365 ordering, you can set up templates to auto generate for your managers. Those templates can have dynamic dates and pre-selected items. It can make all of this much less daunting for your managers. In fact, I would say once you get humming with this stuff, it makes it easy. And making things easy makes the likelihood that this stuff gets done and done right go way up. In the same way, with ordering, we have shopping lists to make this even easier from like a conceptual standpoint. When an operator goes into dry storage and reviews inventory counts to get an idea of what they need to order, they don't typically do it vendor by vendor. They don't look at dry storage and think, let me look at my Cisco stuff, and now let me look at my US food stuff. They don't think that way. I don't think that way. But with shopping lists, they can generate a list of items that need to be ordered regardless of vendor. And the shopping list will create as many POs for that shopping list for as many vendors as it needs to. If there are 55 items being ordered on a shopping list, that's what we identified that needs to be ordered. It's possible that that shopping list will generate 55 purchase orders for 55 different vendors. That's a bit extreme. It could be just one or two, but this removes the confusion in those early steps of putting together an order. It allows an operator to just identify, what do we need? I don't need to, factor in which vendor it is. I just need to focus on what we need. And as we've established, the easier this stuff is, the more likely it is to get done. So this is an additional tool towards that end. Another thing real quick that I wanted to mention is that R365 can help with enforcing contract pricing. It's as simple as, entering contract prices in vendor items, in the highlighted field we're showing in this slide, and then running our contract violations report. I recommend setting up this report as like a monthly email to a purchasing manager or managers so that it's straight to their inbox. I tell customers this all the time that have contract pricing. All they have to do, that manager, once it hits their inbox, is open it and check for violations. If there are violations, it's just a matter of contacting those vendors that are present in that report to get the credit memo process started. And, contract violations happen all the time. Doing this and monitoring this with that report, it's such an easy win. It's something I highly recommend. But the real value of this module of purchasing is suggested ordering. This is a game changer. Earlier, I mentioned that, a manager walking into dry storage or walking into the, cooler to see what they need to order. With this, they could do it from the beach. When you have accurate AP and you take regular inventory, the system has everything it needs to calculate what's called usage per $1,000 in sales. This can then allow the system to look back at the last count, know how many days have elapsed since that last count, and deplete that inventory accordingly. This gives you theoretical on hand. What should be on my shelf right now? And when this is dialed in, ordering becomes much easier, having that Theo on hand number, but also more efficient. This will absolutely mitigate over ordering, which is then another tactic you're utilizing at that point to improve your COGS. So having access to a theoretical on hand is great, and it's a key part of order suggestions like the one shown here. Once created, you can set up a preferred U of M, a preferred vendor item. You can get down to that level. Par quantities, Par quantities being purely informational, but it's something you can set up in those records, so it'll display here for informational purposes. So all of this is present while orders are being processed. This can greatly limit variability in ordering and save money quickly, like the example we went through with the ribeye and lobster and tri-tip. Once all of this information is taken into account, vendor items and quantities are selected. You can then review purchase orders, the actual orders, which you see in the bottom right corner there. Clicking that button, this is where you can lean on R365 to do some additional usage calculations. In the purchase order, when the suggest quantity button is clicked, users are prompted to select when the product is going to be used. This is consumption and buffer days. This is just telling the system when this product is planned to be used, to be consumed, to be depleted. Buffer days can be needed for a variety of reasons, but as an example, I like to imagine a large cut of, like a side of beef or, brisket or something that needs a day or two to thaw. For that, you would want to select 1 or 2 buffer days to tell the system we're not consuming that, we're thawing it out. And that way the system won't add usage for those days. Those will be buffer days. In this case, the system will use forecasted sales if you're doing a sales forecast, the item's usage per 1,000, which we talked about, and the THEO on hand to determine a quantity suggestion. How much is on the shelf right now? When are we getting the product? When are we using and consuming the product? What sales are we projecting? All of these variables go into R365's calculation so that operators can order only what they need. But again, this tool, and this is the common theme today, is super dependent on inventory counts being correct and regularly approved. The more that that's the case, the better that this component is going to work for you. And that's really the common theme. Everything, so much of this in the inventory module is related to something else. And that's it. That ties it up. It's the operator continuum, always moving around and around. If you can process accurate AP, take regular, ideally weekly, inventory of at least key items, and then be able to utilize order suggestions in your ordering module, you'll be giving yourself a huge advantage. And it's something that I wanted to emphasize today. This is the inventory module is a huge opportunity for you to actually make an impact on COGS. And these are the 3 areas that I would emphasize for it. So that's it for me. I think we've made it to the questions portion, right, Laura Lee?
We sure have. What an awesome presentation, Dan. So holistic. I love the approach, talking about that triple threat. Let's move into them. We've had a bunch of questions come through, and I think some of them are really need to be answered. So let's start with Samuel. He wants to know if you have any tips for making theoretical usage more accurate. He spent a lot of time trying to set it up, but he feels like many items are still pretty far off from their actual counts.
Yeah, absolutely. And theoretical usage, I think the starting point with theoretical usage that often comes up the most often for me is aligning how we're bringing stuff up, especially across locations. Like so many times there will be a POS button in R365, a menu item that isn't mapped, and that we're not aware that at that location somebody's using that to ring up the double cheeseburger. And we're not accounting for it because we don't know that. We haven't made that mapping. So I think consolidating on the POS side, the buttons that you're using is it's a great chance to do it. I know it can be a pain in the butt. I really do. But doing that, it's a perfect excuse to do it. Because oftentimes this is a really cut and dry situation. We've got recipes built in R365. We've mapped them to POS buttons. And that's what drives, it's not like the actual equation. It's that simple. That's what's going to drive usage. And if we've missed a POS button, it's going to be off. And so we want to just make sure that we've got a good eye on that. And that involves talking to your managers, making sure that everybody's on the same page. That would definitely be my starting point. Beyond that, the only other thing it could be is making sure your recipes are accurate. And in a similar way, that's a conversation for you with your heart of house, to talk about, does this look right? And if it doesn't, make those adjustments. And recipes will retroactively correct once you make those adjustments like that. And if it seems to be something outside of that or you're unclear, bring it to your CSM, bring it to support. Let's dive in, because the one thing I will commit to is that we can figure it out for sure.
Awesome. So I know that there is a way, so you tell them, a way to consolidate items that may have been entered as two different items.
Yeah. So I kind of alluded to this in the presentation. It's something that we want to avoid because it's no fun to go back and have to correct this. But yeah, if there's been a duplicate item, assuming that's what you're talking about, it sounds like it is. It's just a matter of deactivating one, remapping vendor items in the one you deactivated to the one that you want to keep. At which point, you can rock and roll moving forward. But really, it's the big thing is it's a matter of remapping vendor items. That's the thing that's kind of interlinked that we need to correct. And it can be a bit of a pain. That's why we don't want that to get too out of control. But that's really the lift there, is remapping vendor items and then deactivating the one you don't want anymore. And there's even methods that we can walk through and support, or your CSM can show you, to make those deactivated items filtered away from your view in any given grid to where you don't even see them. We can't delete them, more than likely, but we can filter them to where they're basically invisible, and that's what I see a lot of in these cases.
Awesome. So remind folks where they can find that list of EDI available. And somebody also wants to know if there is a limit on the number of EDI vendors they can have.
Yeah. So in our knowledge base, our support center, if you go there, and we can put a link somewhere for you guys to access if you don't know how to get it. I will say, in your R365 database, if you go up to the top right corner and there's a question mark there in your R365 instance, it's going to put a drop down that will have knowledge base listed. That's what I'm talking about. That's how you can get there. And once you do, just type in the search bar vendor integrations, and it'll take you and it'll show you our list of integrations for all the vendors we integrate with, not just in terms of who can we ingest invoicing from, but also who can we push POs to, who can we, any number of integrations that we have, capabilities, it'll show you there. And it's quite a bit. And then is there a limit to EDI for a database? No, there's not. There is a fee to set it up, an initial fee. It's not a monthly fee. It's a one-time thing. But no, there's no limit. In a perfect world, I would have customers would have 50 vendors and all 50 of them are EDI. That would be a dream. So no, there's not a limit. All right. Do we have?
Yeah, I'm sharing that link with everybody now. So if you go over to the resources tab, you're going to find that list. Thanks, Dan, for reminding me. I'm just going to grab that up for everyone.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got those, and then I think there was one other around EDI. I think it would require a little bit more support because they're finding that the case cost is changing after they fix the item using EDI. So that
Yeah.
the case of limes keeps changing back to 1 pound instead of 35 pounds.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, EDI, that definitely shouldn't be happening. We're subject to what we receive in that integration. And once it's in your system, there shouldn't be anything in the software that's changing it. But, stuff like that, we would definitely want to dive in and take a look at that. It sounds like you've got a very specific example, and that's the starting point to take that to support or bring it directly to your CSM, and we'll troubleshoot that. It's something that sounds very, very fixable. We'll just want to go to and this is a good place to remind people that question mark in the upper right of your R365 database, that drop down also includes the support center, where you can click that, make a ticket, for our non-POS integrations team, support team. It sounds like this would need to go to, it might need to go to our operations support team, but give them the details, tell them what the vendor item is, tell them the situation, tell them the vendor in question, and they'll dive in and get that figured out.
Okay, let's see what else we can get through. All right, if there is more than one unit of measure added for an item in an inventory count, can they get the price for that second and third unit of measure when in the count entry mode?
Yes, we've got the ability to have 3 inventory U of M's in the app as well for any given item. And when you're counting that, we will make those U of M conversions based on that U of M setup. And all of that, yeah, should be visible in the app, depending on, it shouldn't matter what inventory U of M 1, 2, or 3, it shouldn't matter. You'll have visibility for that in the app. And if you don't, that's another thing. Let's troubleshoot it, because you should have access to all 3 of those U of M's, should they have all 3 or 2.
And somebody, we use a lot of initialisms and acronyms, right? Like U of M, right? So somebody needed to know, what does P&O mean, Dan?
P&O?
You must have said it.
Well, yeah, maybe a PO, purchase order, might
Maybe
be.
there's a PO.
Yeah, and maybe it was P&L, but
P&L. There you
yeah, it
go.
might be
Can you
P&L.
explain both of those?
Yeah, so the P&L, profit and loss, that's kind of the mother of all financial reports. We have a ton of reporting options in our 365, and I'm an operations guy. I like to look at, received by purchase item and item price verification, and the AVT. I love that stuff. That's kind of where I live. But for our customers, the higher up the food chain you go with any given customer, what do they want to see? The P&L, the profit and loss. That's just going to show gross revenue minus prime costs, and it's going to get you that number of net profit. That's the P&L. And then POs, in case that was it, that's just purchase orders. That's just what we fire off to vendors with a SKU, an amount, and that vendor then sends that product out to you in a delivery, and sends ideally through EDI, an AP invoice to your R365 database, and that's it. And that's what a purchase order is. That can be matched to an AP invoice to make sure we got what we needed or we weren't substituted. But yeah, that's a purchase order. And sorry, if it wasn't either of those things that you were referencing, feel free to email me or Laura Lee. We'll get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, and so speaking of the P&L, does that waste log that we have affect the P&L, or is it only going to show up in actual versus Theo?
No, it can, the P&L, it depends on how you've configured it. The P&L is going to be a GL-based financial report. So if we've got a waste GL account, and we've set it up to display on the P&L, yeah, you'll absolutely see it as a part of your prime cost. Certainly. Yeah. It's not like an automatic default thing. All our customers are different, and a lot of these things vary. But if you want to see it on the P&L, absolutely, we can do that for you.
We've got some more creative ideas. Is there a way to make transfers, like when they have items that are set for food inventory, but are also used at the bar?
Right. Yeah. This is a new offering that we have. In fact, I'm almost certain, because I talked to somebody about it today. It's still in beta. I say that because I think we're pretty close to rolling this out fully, but it's called in-store transfers, and it's for exactly that example. We've got the kitchen that uses lemons and limes, and the bar needs some. So the bar comes in and takes it, and the kitchen's like, come on, that's their food cost. That's not mine. You can make a GL transaction with in-store transfers to reflect that, to send that food cost to the bar, not across a location, but in the actual store itself, you can make that adjustment. If you want to maybe adopt that, you're interested in it, it is in beta. So reach out to your CSM, and they'll set you up. I've got to do that today. I've got a customer that reached out about it for the exact same reason, transferring product to the bar.
Awesome. And I guess a similar idea. So if you're dealing with wine that can't be served, they don't want to waste it, right? But the kitchen can cook with it. So how do you account for that type of product usage? It's a transfer of use, right?
Yeah, it would be, if we transfer across locations, that's just a transfer. That's an item transfer where we ding those cost accounts and inventory accounts across locations accordingly. But if it's in the same store, which it sounds like it is, this would be another example where in-store transfers would be perfect. And in this case, it's actually, I'm really glad you brought it up. It's like a perfect inverse example to the one that I see all the time, which is the kitchen sending food cost to the bar. This is the bar potentially, or the front of the house sending needing to transfer food costs to the kitchen in a very efficient way, by the way.
All right. So we've got so many questions. I'm hoping we can get to at least a couple more.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Okay, so I'm not sure about this. So does the shopping list allow you to compare across vendors to get the best price?
So the shopping list, we're not going to have live pricing in the shopping list. We won't have a feed, to update that. Now, you'll definitely have access to see the most recent received price across vendors. It's not going to be visible in the shopping list for comparison outside of uh, switching those vendors while if you've got a preferred vendor item and you select that and you see that last received price, you can certainly change that to a different vendor item and see that last received price. But it wouldn't be that would be how you do it. And I just want to clarify that it wouldn't be like live pricing from the vendor itself, if that makes sense.
So is that similar? We've got another question in here about contract pricing, right?
Yeah.
So they want to determine their preferred vendor by contract pricing. Are there any reports or where can they do that? Can they affect that in the solution?
So we're wanting to, you would want to have for any given item that has multiple vendors, you would want to make the preferred vendor item or preferred vendor the one that is set up with contract pricing, it sounds like.
Yep.
Right. And to do that, to verify which vendors you have set up for contract pricing, that's actually a great question. I'm not sure the answer. I think it is a field in the um, vendor grid on the accounting side when we list all our vendors and we see all of them there. I'm pretty sure that is a column, contract pricing, yes or no. And you would be able to export that to see who are my vendors that I've got contract pricing with. Beyond that, really the only reporting option we have with contract pricing is that violations report. Beyond that, it would be a matter of entering that vendor grid and taking a look, and then setting up, in shopping lists in the purchasing module for vendors that you do have contract pricing, uh, making those the preferred vendors in those templates in those shopping lists. That would be it.
Awesome. Okay, I've got one more thing going on here. I think we want to be able to share. What is going? Yeah, we want to be able to share kind of like our inventory wrap up. Move on to our final question for you. So we want to know, what part of today's webinar was most helpful? Um, how confident are you in applying today's tips? And then if you want to speak to one of our experts to learn more about inventory management, how they can help your operation. Obviously, we're looking at it and from a more holistic view, and Dan's really trying to help you as customers use our products to get to that position of using AVT and really dialing in and learning and analyzing your COGS so that you can improve your margins and, of course, make more money. So, who doesn't want that? And this will help us improve our coaching series webinars. We want to know like what you want to learn about more. So feel free to drop me a line, lcole@restaurant365.com. I'm always trying to bring the best content to our customers so that you can get the biggest bang for your buck. Awesome. So we'll share the results with everybody. Best practices was a big winner, Dan. So thank you so much for bringing those. And then people are feeling confident, right? So that tells us that the content was really valuable and clear, and they can have some actionable insights that they're going to take home with them or take, away from the screen with them today. So thank you guys so much for that. And again, if you're wanting to learn more about a different solution within our platform, please let me know. We're building out the rest of our coaching series for the year, and I am open, ears wide open for those ideas. So I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions today. We're going to move to the next steps and just let you guys know about a few things that we have going on. We have 2 exciting opportunities for our community. Dan, if you could advance the PowerPoint, we're going to wrap it up one more.
There we go.
Yeah. So we want to shine the spotlight on your organization. Right now, we have some really cool things going on, and those are customer excellence awards. So if you are a rock star team, your company is using Restaurant365 in powerful ways, you've got some great results that you want to share with us, nominate yourself. Give yourself your flowers, right? Entries are open. We close July 15th. The ultimate winner, we're going to have 3 category winners. So accounting, operations, workforce. If you fit all the bill for all 3, then nominate yourself for all 3. One winner is going to be taking home $10,000. So reinvest that into your business. We're going to have lots of promotions around that and just for highlighting your excellence and our role in that. So thank you guys so much. Scan that QR code and go ahead and fill out that questionnaire that'll get you into the mix and into that contest. And then also, advance aside, we're going to be bringing you there. So if you win one of those categories, you're in the running for that $10,000 prize. We're going to be announcing it at Restaurant Transformation Festival in San Diego, September 21 through the 23rd. That one is in the center. It's in red because it is a customer extravaganza. So like 2.5 days of learning and networking with other restaurateurs and operators just like you. And it's really fabulous because iron sharpens iron. And that's really what the biggest takeaway that we get from our customers is just spending time with other customers who use our solutions to improve their operations. And ultimately, their bottom line is probably the best thing that they take away from any of our events. So highly recommend that you attend for all those good reasons. And then thank you. Thank you guys so much. Today, that is a wrap for today's session. We apologize for those technical difficulties, but thank you for hanging with us. We hope that you are walking away with new ideas and tools to help your restaurant thrive. And of course, a big thanks to Dan for sharing his expertise. Sorry, got my puppy in the background, but keep an eye out for the recording and don't hesitate to reach out if we can support you further. Have a great rest of your day and happy counting.
Thanks for coming, everybody.